Gentlelady yields back.
Quick parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The gentlelady makes an excellent point about the 3-day notice requirement for subpoenas. I don't think that's ever been complied with in this committee. Will you commit to?
That's not my issue. I'm just reading the laws.
No, it's my time, Mrs. McLean. Thank you so much. Would you commit to honor the 3-day notice requirement that Mrs. McLean properly invoked?
What I comply.
I'll say this to answer the ranking member's question, then I'll recognize Ms. Stansberry. We have complied with the.
And you, okay, well, we might have a dispute about, but you will continue that going forward. You will continue going forward.
We have followed the rules.
Question. Will
We
you
don't
comply?
have the chair, Mrs. McLean, and you don't have the time.
We have followed the rules. This is.
It's
Chair now recognizes Ms. Stansberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's always a wild and interesting adventure here in the Oversight Committee, and this morning certainly doesn't disappoint. I want to talk for a few moments about the resolution that's been proposed in the ANS here, because that's what we're here to debate this morning, and really the content of that, including the assertions about the investigation that led to the moment that we're at here today. But I am really glad that my colleague mentioned that we are a land of laws and that every citizen should have to comply with them, including members of this committee, not to mention a chairman, who was subpoenaed during the last Congress and refused to respond. So if we're going to apply these laws, then they must apply equally, I would think, to even members of this committee, and certainly to the front runner in the GOP's presidential election, which I'll get to in a moment. But let's talk a little bit about this ANS and about the background and correct the record a little bit. First of all, I want to talk about the evidence that was presented to this committee as part of this investigation. More than 62,000 pages of records from the National Archives, on top of 20,000 pages that were already made publicly available, 30,000 pages of private bank records, 2,000 pages of activity reports provided by the Treasury Department, dozens of hours of testimony from special counsel, U.S. attorneys, DOJ officials, FBI, IRS agents, financial advisors, friends, business partners, evidence provided by the Ways and Means Committee, and expert witness testimony by the GOP's own witnesses right here in this committee in September, who sat right there at that table and said there was not sufficient evidence to support proceeding with an impeachment. In fact, there are numerous members of the GOP currently serving in Congress who do not believe there is sufficient evidence. So my question is, where are the receipts? You have reviewed thousands of pages of documents, countless hours of testimony, talked to expert witnesses, including your own witnesses, that can't provide a single iota of evidence of wrongdoing by this president. But last week, House Democrats released this. We have the receipts. In fact, they're all right here in the Mazars report. And for any of you that have not dug in on this report, I want to talk a little bit about what this report shows, because it's actual receipts from foreign governments who spent $7.8 million at Trump properties during his presidency while they were actively seeking to influence foreign policy and decisions by the administration.
Will the gentlelady yield to the question?
Let's talk about some of the receipts that are in here. Malaysia, over $250,000 was spent by representatives of Malaysia while their ex-president was being investigated for a massive corruption scheme, and which Trump's ex-fundraiser was indicted for illegally lobbying on. Saudi Arabia, tens of thousands of dollars spent by the Saudi government and by the Crown Prince and his staff.
Do you yield to a question?
Later give $2 billion to Jared Kushner's private firm. Qatar, tens of thousands of dollars spent by Qatar during what was described as a charm offensive and an arms sale to the government of Qatar by the Trump administration. Kazakhstan, thousands of dollars spent by the president of Kazakhstan on a controversial visit which raised questions about human rights violations, business dealings, and a money laundering scheme involving Donald Trump's properties in New York. So my question is, if the GOP actually cares about criminal activity, How about they investigate the receipts that we have right here?
Can I answer that question?
Of influence peddling by Donald Trump, and a man who is currently facing trial in 4 jurisdictions on 91 counts of criminal activity, who's been twice impeached by this body and is currently trying to run for president again. And
I would love to answer your question.
Of this committee has already endorsed. This is not factually based. This is a farce. This is a political stunt, and it is designed to help Donald Trump secure the nomination this November.
Will you yield to a question?
So let's call it what it is. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield my time back to the chair.
4 seconds.
4 seconds. 3, 2. All right. Time's expired.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter information for the record.
What's the information?
Oh, my God.
State the information.
Thank you.
I reserve the right to object. The minority has not provided a copy of the material for the record. In the past, she's displayed pornography. Is pornography allowed to be, or pornographic photos allowed to be displayed in this committee room, Mr. Chairman?
It's not pornography.
Okay, well, you're the expert.
I'm not an expert, Mr. Raskin.
Seems like it.
Mr. Chairman, I object to the unanimous consent
Mr. Chairman,
request.
Mr. Chairman.
Hold
All you
on.
need is
object.
one objection.
We need decorum. I'm gonna let the lady state, and then if you object still, we'll go from there.
Mr. Chairman, don't we have the opportunity to review the material before
I
it's
reclaim my
provided?
time. I reclaim my time. Mr. Chair, I reclaim my time. I'd like to enter for the record an excerpt from a bank statement.
there's a
bank
objection,
statement that's
Mr. Chairman.
public in regards
You object?
to Hunter Biden
Mr. Mifune
and
has
his
already
bank
objected.
accounts, in his payments.
Mr. Chairman, I object
Okay.
to the styrofoam board. It's not a
Reclaiming
document.
order, reclaiming order, reclaiming order. We'll,
Clearly, Democrats today don't want the truth to come out.
Mr. Chairman,
But
this just means that
I would
any
like to
member will
enter
be able
for
to
the
add to
record-
their 5 minutes by putting on a display of
Mr.
placards.
Chairman, I'd like to enter for the record.
I think all
Mr. Chairman,
members-
from
I
a
object.
bank report that shows
Can we get
proof
some order
of
here?
Hunter
Mr.
Biden's
Chairman,
bank account
where are we in
and
the-
human
all right,
trafficking.
okay. Let's hold off on this. There's several objections. We're going to talk staffs between each other, and then we'll go from there. But I understand, I think what you're saying is from the laptop.
Someone on this committee accused me of revenge porn, and I have a right to respond to that, and I'd like to introduce
But within the rules of the
evidence
committee,
don't.
everyone.
for the
Mr. Chairman,
record. This is important evidence for the record, and it pertains to our investigation into Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. And this comes
So
from
do it behind closed doors like you do it.
Object.
It doesn't appear to be bad, but you ought to.
Mr. Chairman, she's got
is the
9
relevance
placards
of
there. Does she get an additional 5
But
minutes or 10 minutes?
I don't understand how any of you who support the
Well, what's
genital
the order?
mutilation of
Okay.
children
We're
and
gonna
drag queens showing their body parts
reclaim
at parades
order here.
are
We'll
offended.
suspend and let the staff discuss the evidence from the laptop being entered into the record. Chair now recognizes Mr. Fallon from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so
Okay. Hold on. We suspend, so we need to stop for a moment. Okay, hold on. We'll get this. Y'all going to discuss? You want to go?
Yeah, you see, you just submit it and you put it in. You don't get a speech.
Right.
You don't get a speech to UC. You get the request, you say what it is, and you put it in.
So we're going to move on. We're going to call on Fallon now. Okay. All right. Reconvene. Chair now recognizes Mr. Fallon from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, you have to acknowledge that there's a concentrated effort to deflect and distract, and this is not about January 6th, and unfortunately for the Democrats, it's not about Donald Trump. This is about Biden family corruption, plain and simple. And what really gets me is from just an individual and from an American to being an American is the fact that I disagree vehemently with most of our friends across the aisle when it comes to politics. I will submit that most folks that serve in Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, are not corrupt. They're not on the make. They're not trying to enrich themselves. Hunter Biden is. The Biden family was. And so to sit here and defend a fella that doesn't merit that kind of defense is just interesting. And quite frankly, I find it sad as well. And I think he's a coward to come in here with this stunt again, because, you know, you can define someone that's all about themselves by the way in which they act. And he clearly does that. That's what we're here to discuss. So let's talk about the process, because we've been told that, hey, he was here, he's ready to testify, just let him testify. For the American people, to make it very clear and digestible, when you are deposed in Congress, the majority gets an hour and the minority gets an hour, and it can go on indefinitely. So what usually happens is you can get 100 hours of questions in. You can go drill down. You can get into the efficacy of the procedure because you can go in depth, and you can hold whoever is the witness to account. If we have just public testimony, what happens here is we all get 5 minutes. Times roughly about 60 equals 300. Doing the math without a calculator, that's 5 hours. So instead of hundreds of hours, you only get 5. And witnesses are very good with their counsel to deflect and distract and answer really slowly, etc. That's why this is about procedure. 100 hours, 200 hours, and then we can come in to public testimony and ask questions about what we have read and make that public. So what I would have loved to, he was here, he left, unfortunately, because I would have loved to at least ask questions while he's in the room for the first time. I've never laid naked eyes on the man until just now. But I would have loved to have asked certain questions like, why did he feel special that he could evade paying taxes on millions of dollars of income? Why doesn't he pay it back? I know a lot of it is already outside of the statute of limitations, so he can't be prosecuted for it, but he can certainly still pay it back. That's a moral obligation that any American has. I'd like to ask him what he did, his company did to earn $3.5 million from Yelena Baturina, who was married to a corrupt oligarch who used to be the mayor of Moscow. What did he do to have Kenesh Razhikev from Kazakhstan wire him $142,300? The very next day he bought a Porsche. What did he do for Mr. Razhikev? What did he do? Did he get bribed, naked bribe of $5 million by Mykola Zlochevsky? And did he have any experience in the energy sector prior to his father becoming vice president, because Zlochevsky paid him $1 million a year? Interestingly enough, the CFO of Burisma, Vedant Pazarsky, had dinner after he paid Hunter Biden millions of dollars, had dinner with his then sitting vice president dad at Cafe Milano. Did that happen? Because it seems like it did. Did Kenesh Razhikev, who gave him, but essentially bought him the Porsche, he also had dinner with his dad. And yes, coincidentally, Yelena Baturina as well had dinner with his sitting vice president father at the time, who I would also like to have asked him, having been an entrepreneur, business person myself, why create 30 shell companies if you have a legitimate business? What did your business do? What services did they provide? What goods did they sell? Who pockets seed money? I have never met anybody in business that pocketed seed money. It's the lifeblood of your venture. Why did you take millions from foreign entities? And who was the big guy? Mr. Hunter Biden, was it your dad? 10% for the big guy? When you said in that WhatsApp message that I'm sitting right here with my father, was your father really there? Will you give up your geolocations on your phone with your dad so we can determine if you guys were actually in the same room at that time? Why did you email your daughter or text her and tell her about, boy, I wish I didn't have to give 50% of my salary to dad? This all is just questions that under a deposition, when we have hundreds of hours, we could ask this. And I'm only one member of a committee of 60. I'm sure my colleagues would have plenty of questions as well. So this is what it's about. It's about justice. And think about who you're defending here. He's not worthy of your defense. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The chair recognizes Mr. Lynch for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will agree with my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Texas, that this is a sad day, but perhaps sad for different reasons. This whole process has become such a sham. The underlying purpose at the beginning of these hearings was that, as was the title of one of the first hearings we had, a hearing on the basis for an impeachment inquiry against President Joseph R. Biden. And at that hearing, the Republicans and the Democrats had an opportunity to bring witnesses forward that would actually provide evidence to the committee so that we could make a decision to substantiate or to undermine the call for an impeachment. And we sat in this hearing, and the Republicans brought their witnesses in, and I have to admit, witnesses that had considerable experience and expertise and impressive resumes. And so we asked them, so this is the big moment. We asked these expert witnesses that the Republicans had brought in, are there any basis or underpinnings that would warrant an impeachment inquiry at this point? And these witnesses had reviewed almost all of the 14,000 documents that have been provided, transaction reports, Treasury reports, and I'll give you the answers. These are the Republican witnesses. This is Jonathan Turley and I think Bruce Dubinsky, who was a consultant. One witness said, and I quote him, he did not believe that any of the current evidence would support articles of an impeachment, close quote. That's the Republican witness that you had your moment. You had your moment to bring in the witnesses.
Would the gentleman yield?
No, I will not yield. I will not yield. The other witness that the Republicans brought forward against President Biden, he said under questioning he had no basis to even suggest that there was corruption, fraud, or any wrongdoing on the part of the president. Now, we are all familiar with Hunter Biden's, his conduct. There have been explanations of his drug addiction that have been widely publicized, something that maybe a few families of members of this committee might be familiar with, when people go sideways because they're addicted to drugs. But the very moment to pursue the underlying purpose of these hearings has been completely diverted. There's been no evidence brought forward against the President of the United States. And as to this witness coming here today, or his reluctance to submit himself to private investigations, can be, I think, credibly explained given the lack of trust that has surrounded these hearings. There have been story after story about leaks coming from those private interviews. Blatant misinformation and disinformation that the chairman and other members of the committee have offered to the press. So-called bombshells. That's what it was on Fox TV. Bombshells turned out to be a dud. Turned out to be completely false. But under the auspices of this committee, those members, including the chairman, put out these stories in the press because they could not be refuted. They were not subject to cross-examination. They were not provided for or provided by any credible witness. It was just made up in the minds of the chairman of those members. That's why this gentleman wanted to testify in public, so someone could not distort his statements and leak them wrongfully to the press. The chairman